All right, so after leveling most of the classes to level 25 in Diablo IV, I tried to make sure that I wrote down a few things. Tried to set my excitement bias to the side and look at the game with a bit more of a critical eye. See, up to this point, the two videos that I've made about Diablo IV have been about, well, positivity, and also just taking on a lot of the bad takes, the worst takes that I've seen on the internet so far regarding Diablo IV. See, now this video is a little bit different. While I feel like it's great for us to talk about the positive things and also try to defend the game from just poor takes in general, this video is talking about my concerns. First off, welcome to Legendary Drops. My name is Ian. I am a marketing major that for some odd reason works in construction because, well, that's just how the job market works. I am not a games journalist. I'm definitely not a game developer, and I'm not even a theory crafter. I just go to max roll. I'm a dude with a microphone, a camera, and more time on his hands than he knows what to do with. I love to talk about video games, and I love talking about Diablo IV. Diablo is one of my favorite franchises of all time, next to Final Fantasy, and I really, really want to see this game succeed, and I think it's going to. However, I think it's safe for us to talk about some of the concerns, and these concerns that I have are casual's concerns, because that's what I am. Casual gamer. Now in this, I would like to be able to talk about not only some of the things that I experienced with the game, but also I kind of want to go over some stuff that the community at large has kind of glossed over a little bit, specifically that Eurogamer interview. I would just like to say, holy shit, I forgot how absolutely ass Blizzard is at responding to player feedback and talking to games journalists. I read the Eurogamer interview with general manager Rod Ferguson and game director Joe Shelley. The distance between player concerns and their responses was astounding. The self-assured responses to significant concerns like class balance and dungeon layout fell so flat it was downright offensive to those who enjoyed Diablo IV and genuinely want to see the game succeed. Blizzard, moving forward, you really should have your community manager or somebody better at handling questions than the people that are so closely tied to the development of the game. Developers tend to be defensive regarding the hours of hard work they poured into making a game. They are more likely to see the player being in the wrong, as the game is their creation and a source of pride. I get it. I would think that we're in the wrong too. I mean, we haven't played the full game till max level yet. We've only played up to level 25 in one zone at that, in this large world that is Sanctuary. So let's talk about that point right there. Discounting the player's feedback and experience because we only experienced a small portion of the game. See, this kind of reminds me of a story. Once before, I was invited over to a buddy of mine's house. He wanted to play Street Fighter or something like that. And when I rolled up to his house and we walked into his front door, as he opened the door, it literally moved and pushed trash on the floor away from the door as he moved it. And as I peered inside, the entire inside was filled with garbage and empty boxes and cans on the ground and plates of food on the ground. See, it didn't take me walking through his entire house to know that probably somewhere in his house, in some closet in a bedroom, there was a 13 or 15-year-old bag of Wendy's that's now turned into some type of amalgamation from a third or fourth dimension. If there's problems at the front door, there's a good chance that there's problems beyond. When you have players that are complaining about how Druid and Barbarian feel terrible to play, you don't respond with, just wait until you hit level 40. You're basically saying that you're not going to have any fun until you've put X amount of hours into the game. But hey, that's okay, because we designed it to not be fun. They consciously designed classes to feel like ass until we got to a certain level. I would like them to say that out loud 3 times, and hopefully Michael Keaton will appear to slap them in the face. Class balance is a valid concern, especially when we're talking about an ARPG that heavily favors ranged combat. Joe Shelley in the Eurogamer article mentions how melee combat proposes both challenging and rewarding gameplay. I played both Druid and Barbarian. If you're playing full melee, it's not a challenge. It's a chore. Oh, the boss moved. Better chase him down. Oh, the boss dropped an AoE. Better move out. Not only did Barb and Druid have lackluster damage at early levels, but they had a ridiculous amount of downtime due to the boss's design. So you tell me, what's fun or engaging about 3 to 5 seconds of not being able to attack the boss? Constantly playing musical chairs and taking 10 minutes to kill a boss. Meanwhile, we can go and look at Rogue, who can have a build that has 2 dash charges, a teleport backstab, and just their standard dodge. Playing as a melee rogue, you can perfectly time boss fights, dodge out, then dash back in or teleport right back behind them. The high action combat, the high actions per minute, it's engaging, and you feel badass doing it. Slowly walking in and out as a barbarian, chasing down enemies, having leap on cooldown, it's not fun. It's boring and tedious. Now, I'm not saying that D4 needs some major rework to all of their bosses, though I do hope that they plan on making more engaging fights in the future and tweak things to make it more fun for all classes. I think something they could do to kind of fix some of the movement concerns with Barb is either just increasing the range of leap, lunging strike, or, picture this, making Steel Grasp function like Kratos' Chaos Blades in God of War, where not only the chains pull enemies towards you, but if the enemy is large enough, like a boss, it'll actually pull you towards them and deal massive damage. Imagine dodging out of an AoE, throwing your chains out, hitting the boss, dragging yourself into the boss, and dealing a massive hit. It just sounds badass. I want that. When I brought up my concerns with the Barbarian's movement, I actually ended up getting some pushback from my chat. They said, hey, wait a minute. Barbarian has 3 different movement skills and a dash. Well, but the thing is that chances are you're only going to have 1 of those skills equipped, maybe 2 at most, and that's all going to depend on whatever legendary affixes or legendaries that you have. And keep in mind, legendary drops were increased during the time of the beta. So knowing that, chances are you're not going to have all 3 of those equipped because you need other skills to be able to do damage. And now that we're thinking about that and the drop rates, think about how bad Druid's going to feel. Which brings me to my next concern. Skills and legendary affixes. Right now, and again, I know this was just the beta, however, it feels like I'm playing the way that the developers want me to play instead of how I want to play my class or how I want to build my character. Now, you could look at this in a good light as well, right? Because if the developers designed the game for us to play it a very specific way, then that means that chances are nobody is going to have any problems getting to the end game. They're not going to need guides. They're not going to need build videos. They're not going to need to find specific pieces of gear to be able to ensure that they can at least beat the base game. But one of the things that kind of annoys me is that depending on the character, each one just has skills that feel like they're just the far and away best option in the skill tree, and they tend to render the other skills in the skill tree useless unless you have a legendary affix that changes them to make them more useful. I don't like gear being the focus of how I build my character. It makes my gameplay, my style of play, completely reliant on getting legendaries to drop with the affixes for skills that I want to use or that I enjoy using. Instead of building our own characters, we are falling into archetypes, a meta, preordained by the developer. There's no freedom in that. That feels like Diablo 3 with set pieces. The issue is going to be magnified when the full game is released and we are leveling. As I said before, the drop rates were increased during the beta, which means we may be running raw skills for far longer than level 25. Now, to add to my concern, Joseph P. Piora, Diablo 4's associate game director, tweeted saying that less than half of Diablo 4's legendary affixes are contained in the Codex of Power. And looking at what we could see from the Codex of Power in the beta, this means there is a lot of legendary affixes, which is great because that allows you to have a lot of diversity in the game, but this could make it next to impossible for you to be able to target a build that you want to play, making builds that you yourself envision completely dependent on RNG because, well, we can't trade legendaries. Meaning, the second that you find an impactful legendary, you have to play around it because you have no choice not to. Maybe you like playing a ranged rogue, but you get the Twisting Blades affix. Now you have to play Twisting Blades because it would be a waste otherwise, even though you want to play ranged. I feel as though this is kind of just a tough discussion to have overall. I think that obvious builds tailored by the developer do make the game far more approachable for a larger audience. It is going to guarantee that many players make it to the end game without much of an issue. However, at the same time, while they're lowering the skill gap, I'm afraid they're going to close off the skill ceiling. See, I actually think Asmongold is the one that said it best. He said that Blizzard should be listening to some of the concerns of the hardcore audience because their concerns today are the concerns for the casual players in 3 to 6 months from now. Because as this game grows in popularity and that casual audience falls in love with the game, there's a good chance it becomes their main live service title, the game that they hop on every single day after they get home from work. Those people eventually turn into hardcore players. Maybe the Paragon board completely shifts my take on this. However, I feel like it would be a lot more fun if the affixes were to be somewhat of a blend. Have some affixes in the skill tree and other affixes on the items. As it stands, all skill tree nodes only really have the option to augment damage, debuffs, cooldown, and CC. It's a far more limited system than we had in Diablo 3, and it has not only less options, but less impact. The best example of what I'm trying to say is, let's say we take the Twisted Blades affix that the Rogue had, where when the blades return, they circle around the player. Let's say we toss that into the skill tree. Then the gear you could find would have affixes that extend the duration of the blades, their AoE size, imbue them with an element, maybe provide you with a buff, or cause some other type of reaction. Maybe this is something that Blizzard tries during a season to see how the players react to it. Maybe instead they use something like the Kunai's Cube, where we can have certain affixes always active, so the player will have a little bit more freedom to play that the way that they want to. I know this seems more like a hardcore player issue, however, I firmly believe that most players want to play their personal idea of what they want their class to play like, depending on the skills that they're given. Right now, as it stands, it just feels like legendary affixes are no better than set items in Diablo 3, especially when we're looking at some of the multipliers. A system that ultimately made that game less enjoyable, limited build variety, and in combination with competitive rifts, caused the game to fall out of favor. If they're gonna have legendary affixes that are so far and away a no-brainer choice, maybe we should just include them in the skill tree. While I don't think this is something that Blizzard is going to work on in the near future, I will say it is something that I think may threaten the longevity of Diablo 4 as a live service title. Obviously, we don't know everything about the endgame, the other gear rarities or other affixes, so maybe this is something that's not even actually a problem. We'll see. Personally, I'd like to see them do something like Last Epoch does. I think they probably have the best skill and passive system I've probably ever seen in a game, allowing players to customize each skill to their liking, customize their class passives to augment those abilities as power, and then you use gear to bring all of that to the next level. I have a review on Last Epoch coming soon, by the way. Another issue, and this is something that's kind of resonated across the community, you've probably seen 30 or 40 videos talk about this issue by now, and that's dungeon design. And one of the really interesting things in that Eurogamer interview is that it seems like our concern with dungeon design went right over the Diablo 4 development team's head. Especially Joe Shelley believing that what we want is for them to have monsters respawn within dungeons, which is a really odd take on even how the question was actually submitted to them in the first place. See, that's not our problem. The artwork and everything like that, how the dungeons look was another thing that they thought we had an issue with, which I'm pretty sure everybody can agree that Diablo 4's art style, its graphics are absolutely S tier. What we have a problem with is how unintuitive and how all of the dungeons just seem to lack any imagination so far as how we complete them. Going and walking to go get keys. Come on, man. And I think one of the things that probably really frustrates me with this is that this is the same company that makes World of Warcraft. You guys have made more dungeons than anybody. So how are you not communicating back and forth with those teams and trying to make some really cool dungeons? And actually, I'm going to get a little bit more into that because there are some pretty awesome solutions that they could have. Walking around, looking for keys, walking back, or just looking for the last pack of enemies to kill gets very repetitive very quickly, and I can't imagine that other dungeons in the game don't do something similar. Just give us some puzzles to solve. Make the dungeons a rush to the boss. Give them some World of Warcraft dungeon design where they have mid-bosses, or maybe try something that isn't so genre-specific. If it were me, I would add other mechanics to distract the player from the design choices we've made. Maybe give the dungeons a ranking system so that if players clear it without using a certain amount of health potions or under a certain amount of time, they can get more loot and more gold. I think Asmongold had a great idea with this, which I watched so much of this dude and have for so long, and just shout out to the GOAT. Your content keeps me sane, dude. It keeps me sane. But I really like his idea where you could just skip all of the dungeon mechanics, rush to the boss, and fight the boss as an empowered version, yielding more loot and more experience. Shelly mentioned how at the end game, dungeons would be augmented through keys. However, this is the exact same problem that faces the Druid and Barbarian with their scaling issues. You're lessening the potential variety, excitement, and fun at the beginning of the game, which is ultimately going to turn players away, and it's a poor design decision. Many games today treat the leveling experience as a chore, and many gamers have just accepted that as a core part of the MMO and RPG genre. Endgame should be deep, fun, and engaging. However, leveling should be just as good and just as exciting as the endgame is. Besides all that, I can't imagine that the keys that are going to augment dungeons are going to make any massive changes more than Mythic Plus affixes do in World of Warcraft, either by buffing the player, creating hazards, or buffing the monsters in the dungeon. I don't see how this solves the issue of generic level design. If anything, when the players are going to be under heavy challenging affixes, it may magnify the issue and make players even more annoyed that they have to carry blood shards across the dungeon to open the boss door for the 1,000th or 10,000th time. I'm hoping over time, as the game evolves, Blizzard hears more feedback from the players, and they take the concerns of the community more seriously. If Blizzard wants this game to succeed, if they want to make more money through their live service, they must listen to the community when it comes to these issues. With that said, I feel like it's best for us to try to remain unified in voicing our opinions about Diablo IV. I've seen far too many people get hung up on things that just really don't matter that much. Things like the UI. I get it. It looks like the Diablo Immortal UI, which is a solid UI. It's a very easy to read UI. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't need 17 pages of stats in front of me the minute that I hit C on the keyboard. On top of that, I've also seen people complaining about like the text stylings and stuff. The font, is it readable? Yeah, okay, whatever. Look, I think that Diablo 4 is going to be an absolutely incredible title. Not only is it going to sell well commercially, but it is probably going to be a mainstay in the RPG community just because it's Diablo. That's just what it does. But as I've said before in the videos that I've made previously, which is 2, this is not my 3rd Diablo video, but as I said before, like this game just has the foundation to be really good. The combat feels really good. The game engine is very solid. The graphics are fantastic. The music is top tier. The sound design is freaking bonkers. The voice acting is just incredible. So we just need to make sure that the things that we obviously can see that can be issues in the future are the things that we're talking about today. And making sure to keep those things fresh in conversation so that Blizzard constantly sees that stuff being brought up and they know what they need to be working on or what they need to look to be working on in the future. Anyways, as always, thank you guys for watching the video. I really appreciate you guys coming and stopping by. I know people have been asking for more Diablo content, so I think what I'm gonna do is that initially I was just gonna like drop a Diablo video and then like walk away and go talk about like 5 or 6 other games and then come back to it. But maybe I'll start just doing it every other week instead, just to appease the audience. But I really appreciate it. I got a video coming up planned on Final Fantasy XVI soon. I also have a review on Last Epoch as well. I just recently, last week, did a video about why there are so many new MMOs coming out. I highly suggest you guys go and watch that one. I put a pretty decent amount of noggin thinking into that, so that was cool. But anyway, I love you guys. Have a righteous day, and the cat says bye too.